House Speaker John Boehner has announced he's resigning. The question is, who will take his place? Florida's Daniel Webster says he'll run. There's speculation number 2 House Republican Kevin McCarthy is in line for the job. But senior political editor Steve Shigat.
Inside the Paris Sea Palace, high above 2919 East Broadway. This is the Jake Feinberg Show on Power Talk 1210 KEVT. Salary to Tucson. Thank you for making us part of your day today. And without further ado, I want to introduce my next guest, a really talented keyboard player, came out of the San Francisco Bay Area, has played with everybody from Herbie Hancock to the City Section to Graham Central Station. Nate Ginsberg, welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Thank you so much, Jake. Thanks so much for having me on.
Well, you have no idea what a thrill this is, man. I wanted to start off by asking you, sort of, just stepping back for a minute and asking you if you were aware of the of how music was created, that the fact that music was created in the community when you were really coming up. I mean, when you look at the bands, especially from the regional area of the country that you were in, they spawned from the community, and I wanted to know if you were aware of that at that time.
Well, I grew up in Fresno, which was a little bit of a melting pot, actually, for both the L.A. area and the San Francisco area. It's about 4 or 5 hours from L.A. and 3 or 4 hours from San Francisco. So we got the groups that came in from those areas, and of course, it would always be on a Friday or sometimes an off night, but I would come and see them. I would go and see them at the bigger venues, and I was definitely influenced by that type of, you might say, community. That's, and being in Fresno, like I said, those groups, they needed an extra stop off between San Francisco and L.A., so we got to see quite a few groups there in Fresno.
What can I ask you? Did any like pop groups come out of there, like that we know that the world knows of it all?
Well, there was a duo I know for sure. Lee Michaels came from Fresno.
Wow! Oh wow! Okay, the organ drum duo kind of thing. Yeah,
and
right.
If I'm not mistaken, Cher also came from Fresno. She was, I believe she was Armenian. There's a large Armenian population in Fresno.
Wow.
Bruce Conti, whom I met in Fresno, came from there. He was one of the original guitar players, probably of the most famous recordings from Tower of Power. He got fairly big in Fresno and then moved up to San Francisco, where he was in a band called the Loading Zone, and eventually worked his way into Tower of Power.
I know it's funny. I just reconnected. I just connected with Conti. He's out in the Philippines, but that cat and his brother. I guess here's the question. Tell me, Sacramento had
Fresno.
I know, but I'm saying Sacramento had Dave's Soul Kitchen. San Francisco had a host of, the Fillmore District. Tell me the couple of clubs that the organ trios, because at that time, but really before your professional career took off, the organ was coming out of the church and into the nightclub. And I'm trying to figure out the black soul clubs, the jazz clubs that you were frequenting in Fresno.
Yeah, where I was, there was the Elks Club, which brought many groups from black, really soulful black groups from out of town. That was the Elks Club, and they also had some, a lot of pickup. If you were good in the Fresno area and somebody was coming through, maybe somebody like James Brown, or even possibly a lesser name, you would be called in and to play at the Elks Club with those people. There were a few, as jazz clubs, there was the Frontier Club. That was a very small place. Let's see. I know at one point there was a Tokyo Gardens that had some jazz music. A lot of the let's see, Johnny Salatino was also one of the organ players around that area at the time.
Wow.
But what my influence was not so much as a jazz organ trio. It was, they had, there were groups that came into the Rainbow Ballroom. There was also, I can't think of the other ballroom that was right around at that time frame when, the music was hot. The music was pretty much on fire, and that's where everybody went to.
Were you more? You said you weren't that getting off on jazz so much at that time. Or what? I mean, you really
no, not true. I was into jazz at the time, but I at around 72, I was 18, so I wasn't quite as old as some of the other guys that were already in the scene before I arrived on it. They were my mentors for sure. And then right about 73, the end of 73, I moved up to the Bay Area. So that was my...
Yeah, Nate Ginsberg. Nate Ginsberg moved. I was born in 78, so the idea that you went during, I think, maybe the greatest year in music history, 1973, into the Bay Area. I cannot even... Can you describe the first gigs that you got when you got to the Bay Area? Who got you? Who sort of opened themselves up and said, "Hey, Nate, I got a gig. Let's do it."
Well, actually, I was as it was Bruce Conti, who came from Fresno, was on a bus from San Francisco out to Concord, which is only about an hour from San Francisco, and the Tower of Power was playing out there. And a friend of the whole band, Tower of Power, there was a man called a really good, wonderful soul singer, a white guy, Mitch Tubman, was on the bus, and Mitch had just his band had just broken up. He was looking for some new players, brand new players, and he asked Bruce, and Bruce knew us. We were a group from it's called March Hare at the time, from Fresno, and all four of us came up to play with Big Mitch through Bruce's recommendation, actually. So it was all through Bruce Conti.
I love this. I mean, this is...
I was able to make a break up here. we started playing in the local clubs at the time, a little bit of top 40s, some original, but to really work, it was something that we did for 5 nights a week, and then we had off nights as well, Saturday and Sunday and Monday. We were very busy with a band we called it Baby Fat. He was a big dude, It was funny. In those days, he wore tennis shoes that were platform tennis shoes. He was an outrageous character, but a wonderful singer, and he was a great mentor for me, actually. He turned me on to so many wonderful jazz and deep, soul singers. That was just amazing. At that time, also, Tower of Power was ultra hot. With What Is Hip, they had just recorded, that Tower of Power album with What Is Hip, and we were on a roll at that moment.
All right, I want to go. This is extremely important. This is where the Jake Feinberg Show lies, really. The name of the band that you were in originally, the quartet, was called what? That came up from Fresno.
We were called, the original, it was actually a conglomeration. There was Charlie McGarrian from the Jesters, and the other three of us were from a band called March Hare, from Alice in Wonderland. It was called March Hare.
Right.
And pretty popular in Fresno. It was actually a larger band, and we were ready to get out of Fresno at the time. We were the big fish in the small pond, so to speak. And it was time for us to move up. So it was pretty funny because when we first came up to San Francisco, we went right to basically the North Beach area, which would be like somebody said, "Hey, you're going to New York," and you would drive to New York and just end up in Manhattan, thinking that that's where you're going to meet the guys. It was pretty funny. We didn't really know where we were going, but eventually met at Bruce Conti's house on the other side of the San Francisco Bay, and got together. And from that point on, it was a live scene in San Francisco. The Keystone, there was Keystone Corner. That was all jazz. I went to see Cecil Taylor there. I saw Bill Evans there. I saw lots and lots of jazz players there. The original Keystone Corner, which was in North Beach. Then they opened Keystone Berkeley, which was more rock acts, all different. They did so many different styles. That's what was so interesting at the time. It wasn't just rock. It wasn't just jazz. It was soul. They did reggae. They did absolutely everything, and it was so refreshing just because everybody was into something different in the 73, 74, those years for sure.
I was going to ask you, because the Keystone Corner, I think a guy named Frank Herrera sold it to Todd Barkin right when you moved up there, and it became just a straight ahead swinging jazz club. But can you talk to the audience a little bit, Mr. Ginsberg? I really want to believe that you were kicking pedals a lot on the B3. Can you? I think it's really. I mean, did the quartet have a bass player in it, or were you playing bass?
No. At the time, we had a bass player, and he was such a good singer. Part of the thing that I was in at the time was vocal music. Although I was into jazz. In fact, in Fresno, I was totally into Herbie Hancock's music and George Duke.
Oh, yeah.
I love George Duke. So. As much as the organ trio and the older stuff, I was into the newer synth and electric piano, along with Chick Corea was one of my favorites as well. So I wish I could say I was really kicking bass, but I wasn't. I could play the organ, but I wasn't kicking left foot bass.
No, you weren't. Yeah, that was you left that for Groove Holmes and Jimmy McGriff and those. But, this is so phenomenal because you really came in. I have a hard time when the synth really came to dominate music, post 75. But the idea of that early experimentation with electronic keyboards. And, I remember speaking to John Hurd, the bass player, because he was doing all these MPS sessions with George Duke. And he said he said George looked like an old telephone operator plugging in all these things to the board. It was just. Did you have a huge rig? Can you talk about how you got your rig around? Were you playing a big rig at that point?
Yeah. Oh, I had 4 keyboards at one point that I would lug around. I had strings, the old ARP strings. I had a clavinet. I had a Fender Rhodes and a Mini Moog. And it's kind of a funny story. I know. At the time, that's what I was using. I was getting used to the Moog, and eventually I owned a Prophet. But when I did from those days and me being up here, eventually I made myself my clavinet and synthesizer. I worked my way into Larry Graham's band from the original band that I started here in the Bay Area. So I was in Baby Fat, and a drummer, Gaylord Birch, an absolutely wonderful drummer, has worked with a lot of jazz cats, worked with Larry Graham for many years, came to hear our band, and at that time, the Baby Fat band, at that time, Larry Graham was looking for a clavinet synth player, and I had really worked my clav chops, and was fairly good at synthesizer, and I got the audition and got the gig, which was so amazing for me. It was like, wow, this is the big time for me. It's my first start, and it sure was. It kick-started, and I worked with Larry for a year. We were on Soul Train. I recorded 2 albums with him, Star Walk, and My Radio Sure Sounds Good to Me was the name of the band. What's the name of the album? And that was amazing, just to think that, a lonely guy from Fresno came up, worked in a little club band, and the next thing I know, I'm working with a national act.
Well, yeah, you jumped the shark. So let's put in this piece of music here. Take a listen to it, and then we'll come back and break it down. Okay?
Great, you bet. Thanks.
My radio sure sounds good to me. Music on the Jake Feinberg Show, brought to you in part by the Stereo Hospital, the Circle Tree Ranch, and Abbott Taylor Jewelers, and we thank you for your support. All right, Mr. Ginsberg, what do you got for us?
Wow. Well, that's an oldie. That wasn't one of the biggest hits, but he was sure funky. The
funk.
When I did the audition for the band, I just had to take it up and up and up, and they all went right with me. It was crazy.
I wanted you to talk about, you mentioned him earlier, and ever since I talked to guys like Ed Neumeister, who were catching him with the Tom Costa trio at the Black Saint in Oakland, Gaylord Birch, I know he's left us now, but can you just talk about what made him a great drummer? It's so hard now. You talk to guys like Lee Sklar, and you go to these shows. They call them NAMM show chops, and a lot of my generation, they really like to show off and show their technique, but it's the feel, Ginsberg. And I wanted you to talk about Gaylord's feel as a drummer.
Oh, he was all about the feel. In fact, the interesting thing about him is that he could play any style. And it's funny, a lot of times when I'm playing, they tell me, man, you look like you're having so much fun, you look like you're having a ball. And every time, I was not a single time that you didn't look at Gaylord, and he looked like he was having the time of his life. Very energetic, his spirit. It was one thing about Gaylord, you felt his spirit come through. And that's what I really loved about playing with him. And I felt so honored that he picked me to come on and try out with Larry. It was just so very special for me, for Gaylord to pick me and say, hey, come on, join, see if you can join our group, audition for the group. His feel was very special. It's hard to explain it on the radio, of course, but just the way he played, everything was right there. You knew where he was going. It wasn't, some drummers that I played with, they're great. You're not sure, wait a minute, is it going this way or is it going that way? You knew exactly where he was going.
You've played with some heavy cats. I wanted to go back. How did Herbie, did you first see Herbie in Fresno? And also part two of that question, when did he discover you?
Very good question. When I was in Fresno, I was into jazz. I was definitely into jazz, and Herbie was one of my favorites. He was one of the groundbreakers. I listened to him on his jazz stuff and also with Miles, but later, with the Headhunters, that was my stuff.
Yeah, right.
And I have to say, I hung out, in my mind, when I was 16, 17, both jazz was hot and also black music, the funk. And I was 100% both feet into the funk. And when Herbie came out with that and all of Herbie's subsequent stuff with, melding deep jazz with the heavy funk, I was all over it. And that's one of the reasons that, I realized it's funny because Milton Ruth, who's also a drummer that I worked with, he came up from Fresno with us. He eventually married Helen Reddy and was with her for 10 years. He caught me onto the stick control book, and I used that for my funk chops, which was very interesting. But after Larry Graham's band, I started with a group, Jump Street. And the Jump Street was an original group with Bruce Conti, the guitar player, and you mentioned his brother. It's not actually his brother; it's his cousin, Victor Conti, whom I know you probably know from the Balco.
I'm looking to get to Victor as soon as possible. I could care less about Balco because that guy was that band, Pure Food and Drug Act with Harvey Mandel, was ridiculous. How good a bass player he was. Go ahead.
Really great. Yeah. But the Jump Street band, we had an album full of great material. It was David Rubinson, who produced Chambers Brothers, Santana, Big Brother and the Holding Company. He had a whole slew of acts, owned the Automat at that time, and we would rehearse. The Jump Street original band would rehearse there, and I'd walk through, and there'd be Santana in one side and Herbie recording on the other. It was just so crazy. And David Rubinson put our lead singer, Gavin Christopher, with Herbie to write some songs together. So Gavin was singing on Herbie's stuff. Well, around about, we were together about a year and a half, and around about February or March, right when Herbie was starting to go out, David wanted to put Gavin onto Herbie's tour, and that would pretty much break up our band. But it was all good. Eventually, Victor, who was the leader of the Jump Street band, Victor Conti, went with Herbie as well. So Gavin and Victor were going to tour with Herbie, and as it turned out, there were two keyboard players that were supposed to be, the second keyboard players that were supposed to be with Herbie, and they kind of fell out. They had, other problems. They couldn't do it. So I got the audition, and at the time, I was really good with programming synths. And I pretty much programmed all of Herbie's stuff so that when I went into the audition, I knew exactly what I was going to be doing. So there was no doubt. When Herbie asked me, we were all standing around after the audition, he said, "Well, Nate, can you come down here?" I just about fell backwards and said, "Absolutely, I'll be down as soon as I can." That was it. I was in. That was very crazy. Wonderful time for me.
Can you talk about a leadership quality that Herbie has, that separates him, that doesn't get recognized a lot, and that might be a nuanced thing, but that clearly separates him from a lot of other musicians?
Oh my gosh, I've got a great story. So there we were rehearsing, and we were doing it on a regular basis, and one of his tech guys was kind of floating around a rumor that he didn't like the way I played. Something was going down, and I had heard a little rumor going, and I was like, wow, I mean, I'm doing all the parts, I'm doing a great job. I don't know why this would be going around. Well, at our first gig, it was down in San Diego. We took a bus from L.A. We were rehearsing in Hollywood, and took a bus down to L.A. I went down to San Diego and played the open-air theater. Herbie was spearheading lots of different technologies, and he was one of the first to do videos just of the concert so he could watch it back. And he had done a video of that show, of our very first show, and was watching it as we returned to L.A. And he was watching it in the back room. They have a special back room in this big bus. About middle of the way through, he came up to me, he sat down next to me, and he said, "Nate, this is going to be a great tour. I'm so glad you're on it. We're going to have a great time." And basically, he was dispelling any rumor about anything going down by anybody, and he really took a leadership role in that respect.
I love that story. And
it was such a warm-hearted story for me. I felt so comfortable after that, and I have to say, after I read Herbie's book not long ago, Possibilities. I don't know if you read that. It's a wonderful
Not yet,
book.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
And he led just like he said Miles led. Let the guys, kind of by example, but not a lot of instruction, not a lot of, rules and regulations. Just here it is. You'll know what to do. If I have anything to say, I will. But most of the time, I knew what to do. So it worked out really, really well. A lot of fun.
We got another track of music here, Ginsberg. This is very special. So lock it in, and then we'll come back and break it down.
Absolutely.
Make no difference where or who you are. Feel good music in your soul. Make your body rock and roll. I said, hey, 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 Parky Way.
welcome back inside the Parisi Palace. You're listening to the Jake Feinberg Show on KEVT. All right, Mr. Ginsberg, what do you got for us, brother?
Oh my gosh, that brought back a couple of things. We went through New Orleans and played at Old Man Rivers with Herbie when I was playing with Herbie.
Yeah.
And we did a lot of shows and all around the States. Played Avery Fisher Hall in New York. We played, I think we played I'm pretty sure it was in Richmond, and it was a huge stadium, and it was just filled with people. It was one of my largest shows ever. But two of my most memorable with Herbie was the Playboy Jazz Festival. It was about only their third Playboy Jazz Festival. At the time, I met a lot of people backstage. It was at the Hollywood Bowl, the George Duke, and at Chick Corea, all really famous, wonderful cats. And at the end of that show, during the show, Dizzy Gillespie sat in with us.
Oh, this is unbelievable. Unbelievable. Dizzy sat in with you. That is awesome.
That was crazy. It was so cool and so good.
Yeah.
But at the end of the show, Herbie, and here's another part of Herbie's leadership. At the end of the show, he would have me come out with a strap-on synth, and I would play about 64 bars. He would come out from the other side of the stage and do 64 bars. Then I'd move in 32, he'd move in, and pretty soon we'd be dueling synths with strap-ons, right? It was strap-on synthesizers. It was crazy. But this last show not the last show, but the Herbie, the Hollywood Bowl show, Randy Brecker, Michael Brecker, Herbie Hancock, and me, Nate Ginsberg, were trading fours at the very end of the show. It was what an amazing experience. It was very, very special for me.
Did you? So that last piece of music, were you aware that was not Herbie though? That was you. But do you know what band that was?
I'm sorry. Say the question again.
That music clip that we played. Did you know what band that was? Because that wasn't Herbie.
No.
Yeah, that
was me.
That was you, brother, and that was. And this is where the Jake Feinberg pocket lies more than ever before. This is a band with a bunch of characters in it. We got Billy Kreutzmann, Dave Margan, and Jerry Cortez, Alex Lickerwood. That was a live show from 1986 from the Lone Star Cafe in New York City. The band Go.
Oh my God.
The band Go Ahead. But can you talk about City Section? Can you talk about how you met? I mean, did you see Salsa Day Berkeley with the steel drums? I'm obsessed with Margan and Cortez and Kreutzmann, these guys, and the fact that you played and just, you just played with a lot of dudes. I mean, when you think about the drummers, Tony Williams, Billy, but I mean, talk.
Sure.
Can you talk?
That's crazy. I didn't realize that was.
Yeah, you were just too focused on Herbie, but no, that was Go Ahead, man.
Wow. Yeah, that was a really good band. That was a lot of fun. I'm pretty sure Dave Margan had put that together with when I worked with in that band with Bill Kreutzmann, and Alex Lickerwood is just an absolutely wonderful singer. What an artist. I was listening to Alex when he was playing with Brian Auger. That was one of my favorite albums.
Ever. Live Oblivion from the Sunset Strip from the Go-Go. I tell the truth, Lickerwood is on fire. On fire on that. It's like 74.
And the funny thing is, he's still around and he's still doing such a fantastic job.
No, he's kicking butt. I know. He's unbelievable.
Yeah.
Can you talk about City Section? I mean, that to me is I would pay at least $200 to see you guys if you guys were playing right now.
That was an amazing band with Jerry on guitar. He was such a phenomenal guitar player, and Dave Perper was our drummer.
Right.
Dave Margan was bass playing, and Alex Lickerwood was singing. We had a lot of original tunes. We did some very special cover tunes as well, and played around the Bay Area and Northern California trying to get a record deal desperately, and I don't know. I think between, I hate to say it, between the drugs and just a little bit of unorganization and stuff going down, with we've got this opportunity and somebody else had a different opportunity. It never really came together as I would like to. It had.
Right. No, I mean, can you talk? I mean, we've been talking about these grooves and the different kinds of ways that cats were playing, Gaylord Birch and Tony Williams, but Billy Kreutzmann, how would you analyze his drumming style? I mean, even though you didn't play a lot of shows with him, you guys did fit in. You fit together pretty well. Can you talk about his style?
Well, what I really liked, he had a great feel and could do a lot of different things. That was what was great in that band. We ended up playing like he just played Pocky Way. We ended up playing funk. We played rock. We played some swing as well. He had a great swing feel. Absolutely, shuffle feel,
Sure.
really good shuffle feel, and it was just that those days were going around. A lot of it was really, how do I want to say, a little disjointed in some ways, because we would play one place, you'd hear good, the next place you couldn't hear as well. A huge stage, which was hard to hear, and then most of the time in the rehearsals, it was good because you got used to the feeling. So that's kind of
It's talking to Nate Ginsberg, and Nate, I just wanted to ask you before you take off here, can you talk to the audience about your concept of love and how you bring love to people every day?
Oh, that's a great question. In my own heart, I have been, it all stems from music, and I have to be honest, I've been playing music since I was 7 years old, and singing, and it really all does stem from playing music and being joyful in that respect. Now I teach a lot. I teach almost, I teach small kids, large kids, teenagers as well. And for me to give that music back after music has given me so much, that's my you might say that's my legacy. I've added playing for sure, and like I said, when I play, I'm truly blessed. I always have a smile on my face. I'm so lucky to be able to play music for a living and give it to other people along, in instruction. And many, many times I hear, I'm so glad that you taught many families that I've taught the whole family, which is great. And I hear all the time, Nate, the way you play, it's so much fun to watch you and listen to you. So I think I'm the only one in my family that eventually did music for a living, and I think it really shows that I love music, and that's how I display my love.
I'm reading here also, you have a teenage. How old is your son now?
My son is 22 years old. He just graduated from high school. From college.
Yes.
And went to UC Davis out here. He got an internship in New Zealand, and a friend of mine who also works for Adobe, also a singer, Jay Middleton, got him an interview through Adobe, and he passed the interviews great, and now he's working for Adobe. It's amazing. He just graduated. He's doing a great job with Adobe in the social media department.
No, he says, because I was reading here, it says at one point you stayed home to guide him. What does that mean?
Oh, I was the stay-at-home dad.
But okay, so you were just guiding him. You're just guiding him on the right path. I see. That's what it was.
Well, honestly, I had. While my wife went back to work, I was taking him to preschool, and doing all of that. I also, we went through Boy Scouts. I guided him through Boy Scouts, which is a great organization for character building. I love that organization. He has he became a resourceful man because of Boy Scouts. I also mentored his jazz group. He played saxophone in high school. He actually got the he got the Satchmo Award, Louis Armstrong Award, the jazz award from his high school. It was the same high school that Barry Bonds and Tom Brady went to, Sarah High School. So in that way, I guided him, through Scouts, through his jazz group, and that, you might say, yeah, I guided him.
Ginsberg, we'll pick up part 2 after the new year. I wanted to thank you for taking the time and being part of the program today.
Oh, thank you so much. I really appreciate your interviews and all your very thoughtful questions.
You're the best, man. We'll be in touch, all right?
Oh, you bet. Thank you, Jake. All the best.
All right, you too. We'll be right back on the Jake Feinberg Show.